Good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. Welcome to the Cannabis in 2020 webinar this afternoon. My name's Rachel Askett. We'll just give everyone a minute to log on, but if you're already here, you just say hi in the chat, where you're from, what you got up to this long weekend. Hopefully everyone took the time to enjoy their long weekend, maybe getting creative and how we're relaxing and taking time for ourselves. Maybe just getting by, right? That's okay too. We're all experiencing something very different right now. So you can go ahead and say hi, check in. Let me know I'm not alone here. There's been some really great webinars going on the past few weeks, so hopefully you've already been able to check a few out. But if this is your first one, you can hit the chat button on the right-hand side, just like Jackie did. Hey, Jackie. And you can go ahead and type in there. Again, if you're just showing up now, you can go ahead and say hi, maybe where you're from, something you did this long weekend, or maybe a way you're able to relax, or maybe the way you're holding on and trying to keep some normalcy in your schedule. It's a nice sunny day. Well, kind of overcast, but it's a bright day here in Kingston, so that's nice. Hi, Jess from Ottawa, nice and close to Kingston. We got some Ontario representatives here. Yeah, weather's super nice here in Kingston. We'll give it a couple minutes as people log on. We have a smaller room today, but about 10 to 15 people, which will make it fun and interactive. Hi, Cindy. Did lots of cycling this weekend. Very nice. We're getting back into cycling a little bit too now. Something you can do while staying pretty distant from people. I'm sure you have some great trails in Trenton or parkways that you can jump on the waterfront trail. Yeah, oh good. Glad you're having good weather in Ottawa as well, Jess. That's awesome. It makes it a lot easier on the mental health side when you can at least look out the window and see some sunshine. So that's good news. All right, so it's 1:01. Oh, hey, from Halifax, Renee. Jess is on her balcony. Oh, even better. My neighbors have a balcony and I'm always super jealous, but at least you can get out for walks. So we'll get started because it is 1:01 and we'll start the conversation. We are planning for 45 minutes today. So if you do have any questions, you can use that chat box just like we did right now and put your questions there. But just know I will go back to the questions at the end of the webinar today, just so we can maximize the amount of time, just in case people need to leave and head off to another webinar or get some other work done today, that we're sticking to that 45-minute timeline. So during this webinar, we'll be talking about cannabis in 2020. And particularly, we'll be addressing some of the amendments that were made to the Act in 2019. So they were put in place on October 17th to 2019, but didn't come into effect until December. So we'll get into more details around what those amendments were and what that means to you, potentially your family and work. And we'll also give you some strategies on how to reduce risk today. Right, so not wasting any time on that. There's definitely many strategies that you can use to reduce your risk right now. So again, we're looking at 45 minutes today, and we'll start off with some general information about the content. So all of the content is from Strengthening the Forces Health Promotion Program, so DFHP, and that's where the content comes from. Any of your health promotion programming, whether on the webinars right now or how we typically deliver in the classroom or through briefings, is through this content. So it's standard all across Canada, which is the beauty of health promotion. We're all getting the same information. This presentation is the intellectual property of D&D. So any reproduction or retransmission is forbidden, so please don't record. DND is recording it, and it will be posted later if you would like to reference it later on. Also know that some of the topics today, especially talking about cannabis, is of a sensitive nature and is not appropriate for children. So we do ask for parental discretion, maybe use headphones, go to another room, and just be aware of what the content is today, and if any little ears could hear. Also understand that the people's stories are there's alone to tell, so anything shared in the chat room, or if anyone is sharing anything via the video or microphone, not to discuss that outside of the webinar. Again, the webinar is being recorded. It will be available for viewing later on, cafconnection.ca. So active participation is definitely encouraged and makes the webinar that much better, but you can choose your level of participation. So whether that's participating in the chats or the polls, we have a fun game for today's content, but all of that is voluntary. It does add to the experience, but it's not required. So the first question today in the polls is just to get a sense of who we have joining us today. So the question is on the screen there, but I will make the poll live in just a moment. So you'll see that in the right-hand tab right next to your chat. And the question is, what is your affiliation with the CAF community? So you're a serving member, maybe a veteran, family member, civilian employees, that's DND, CFMWS, etc., or other. So we're looking pretty close. We've got 40% serving and 60% civilian employees. That's great. So you've got a little bit of everybody, which is awesome. The content today will look a little bit like this. The text didn't translate very well to the Demio platform, so my apologies for that. So just know it's not your eyes going weird. The spacing is a little strange today. This is what the agenda will look like. We'll talk about, again, legalization in 2020, what cannabis is exactly, cannabis use, health effects of cannabis, and most importantly, harm reduction, lowering our risks today. And then finally, having some resources regarding cannabis and also general resources for COVID-19. First off, I'd like to share the DOAD 9004-1. So this is particularly useful for the serving members joining us today. I've just posted the link to it in the chat, so you're welcome to save that or look at it later. Health promotion, we cover more of the health effects of cannabis, but if you have any questions around the DOADs or policy, reference this or contact your CO or your ADJ for more particular questions around what that means for duty. In general, the CAF cannabis policy outlines restrictions on consumption and the prohibition for certain activities due to risks associated with impairment. So this defines the role, the DOAD defines the role of Canadian Forces Health Services. In general, it goes by an 8-hour, 24-hour, 28-day, and zero tolerance rule. So 8 hours, cannabis use is restricted 8 hours before any duty, right? So recreational or medical, that's restricted 8 hours before any duty. It's restricted 24 hours before any duty, including weapon use or rappelling or climbing, anything of that nature. It's restricted 28 days before any hyperbolic submarine or piloting activities, just to name a few. And zero tolerance on outcan or on any operations. So that's just to name a few of the examples. Again, the policy has more details for you there. And it is just outlining that to reduce the risk of injury and impairment while on duty. So medical use of cannabis in the CAF, a member of the CAF may use cannabis for medical purposes, but it's only under the authorized care of a physician who has lawfully directed the use of cannabis as a part of the member's treatment. Now, it gets a little tricky because CAF Health Services does not authorize, dispense, or pay for marijuana for medical purposes. A member may get a prescription from a civilian doctor, but that prescription must be reported to CAF Health Services. So that use must be reported, and the CAF will then make a plan, whether that's a TCAT, a PCAT. In some cases, it may be a medical release, depending on the health needs of the member. So members who receive that authorization must report to their medical officer and will be assigned that medical employment limitation as appropriate. So just so that's clear, we know the general idea of where the CAF stands on cannabis use, especially pertaining to CAF members and duty. So again, if you have any questions, you can ask them there in the comments and I'll address them at the end of the webinar. We're going to take a turn and use a different style of testing our knowledge today. So I've been having a lot of fun on Friday nights with friends doing trivia nights. And so I wanted to bring a little bit of that to you guys today. So we're going to use a program called Kahoot. So I'm going to give you a little bit of time. This may be the first time you've used this before. Now I'm going to share my screen. And you should see a website come up with a code. Now, I suggest that you would use your mobile device, so a cell phone, smartphone, to access the internet and go to www.kahoot.it. And then you can put in the code. So the code there will bring you to our game that we'll be playing today, testing our cannabis knowledge. And it will also ask you to put in your a name. You can use your own name, you can use a nickname, just keep it family friendly. Again, knowing this is a recorded webinar and we want to make sure everything is appropriate. So you can go ahead and join there, and I will just close off my video so we can get a full screen as we play this. People are joining the game. So it looks like we have 2 players, 3 players added in. Nice. I like the I like the name so far. Definitely have fun with it. And if you're joining us from a recording, so if you're watching this later on after this is live, just grab a pen and a paper and test yourself that way. You can still participate even if you can't join the Kahoot game. So if you're all joined in, let me know if anyone has played this before. So in the chats, you can just go ahead and type in if you're familiar with this or if you've used this before. I'm just curious to know. We got some fun tunes too. Oh, okay, your daughter does in school. Nice, Jackie. So you can turn your own music on or off, right? I won't make that decision for you, but there's definitely some fun tunes you can listen to at the same time. Awesome. So we're going to get started. I think everyone has joined in. And if you haven't, that's okay too. You can watch along if you're not comfortable participating. So cannabis in 2020. Our first question is coming up. So this one is a word cloud. In one word, what comes to mind when you think about cannabis? It's not really a right or wrong answer, right? This is just a little brainstorm. So you can see the countdown. There is a time limit to these questions, just so you know. There you go. So we've got words like relaxing. We think of the smell for sure. During our team meeting today, one of our team members, their daughter's was walking down the street and thought, oh, what is that, rotten garbage smell? I had to think for a second. It's like, oh, that is cannabis, right? So the smell is definitely something that comes to mind. There is for sure a high associated with cannabis. And the word natural, yeah, might come up because it is a plant, right? So we'll get into some more of those details, and it's interesting to see where everyone's mind is at. So here's the real questions. How many cannabinoids are present in cannabis? So you've got 30 seconds to select your answer. Oh, so we got one person got it right. There is actually 100 plus cannabinoids, including THC and CBD in cannabis. So this often blows everyone's mind, right? We hear often only about THC and CBD, but that's because those are really the only two cannabinoids that we have a decent amount of information on. And even that information is limited. So it goes to show that we definitely have some more learning to do about cannabis and the effects that it has on our body. THC is the mood altering or intoxicating cannabinoid, whereas CBD has some calming effects, but it still falls under the same rules of the Cannabis Act, so the same restrictions, especially when it comes to driving and possession. So some evidence does say that CBD would block some THC effect, and CBD is still being studied for potential therapeutic effects. So we'll get into the relationship between THC and CBD a little bit more when we're talking about reducing harm and knowing what's in the product if you choose to use. Sometimes that percentage changes between the two types of strains. So cannabis is a plant, and there's two types. There's sativa and indica. So the sativa has a little bit more of that THC, whereas the indica has a bit more of those calming properties in general. Again, cannabis affects everyone differently. So also take that into consideration, and that will definitely be a key point when we talk about lowering our risks as well. So good job, 100 plus, including THC and CBD. Next question. Oh, we got our leaderboard first. Good job, Seal. Next question. The THC potency of cannabis in 1980 was... What was the potency in 1980? All right. Okay, so we're all over the board a little bit. We had a couple thinking it was upwards of 23% and 13%, but the right answer is 3%. Today, THC potency in cannabis can be upwards of 30% in the dried flower. So that is a huge difference and definitely affects our perception of how potent cannabis can be, especially through media. When you maybe see people consuming a lot of the product in older movies, you think, oh yeah, why does it seem to be such a big deal now? But that intoxicating effect has definitely increased over time. Extracts of cannabis can be upwards of 90%. So that includes things like hash or dab, anything that is concentrated. To be clear, those extracts are not legal. Right? Usually they're used with a solvent, and that could be anything from butane to propane, and those products are not legal, but they can be very potent, and some people definitely do consume them. Cannabis oil is around 3% potency of THC, and edibles and sprays or salves, they can all vary. So it's really key that you are using something, if you choose to use, to look at the packaging and really know what you're consuming. Sometimes the question comes up around hemp, and hemp is less than 0.03% THC, and that's why it's able to be sold in grocery stores. It is food grade, and it has almost no intoxicating effect because the percentage is so low. It doesn't affect the human body. So good job. Let's check out the leaderboard. Yeah, Seal is running away with the points. Let's see if you guys can catch up on number 4. So which is not a cannabis product that has been legalized in Canada? So this includes the items that were recently amended into the Act this past year in 2019. Okay, yes, nice. We got a couple right answers here. So 3 people were correct. Synthetic products are not legal in Canada. Topical products, edible products, and cannabis extracts were just introduced on October 17th in 2019, and they're actually in store by December. So you might be asking what a synthetic product is. Synthetic products are not extract, like concentrated extracts like hash or anything like that. They're actually dried plant matter sprayed with a THC mimicker. So it's not even from the cannabis plant, and it is made in a lab. So under the Cannabis Act, just for extra information, you are able to possess up to 30 milligrams of dried flower. And that was the initial introduction on October 17th, 2017, when recreational cannabis was first legalized. Details around that legalization does differ province to province. So depending on where you are, definitely look into that on the government website and know where your provincial and municipal legislation is. So it was amended the next year to include edibles, extracts, and topicals. And that's because that legalization was a little bit more complicated in how it was brought to market. And the next few questions will address that. So let's check out our leaderboard. Seal, you got some people coming up on you now. Watch out. Next question. We got question 5. This is a multi-select. So you can select all the right answers. Edibles, the maximum amount of THC milligrams per package is, sorry, this shouldn't be a multi-select. There is only one answer here. The maximum amount of THC is what? All right, so we got, I think I had 2 selected, unfortunately, but the right answer is 10. Someone got a bonus question with 100, but that's okay. That was my bad. The leaderboard, we've got Lily catching up real quick. So again, just to correct my mistake there, edibles, 10 milligrams per package is now legal. 10 milligrams per capsule of anything that may be in an extract or pill form. And if it is in that pill form, there can only be a maximum of 1,000 milligrams per packaging. When it comes to topicals, again, any salves or creams that may be put on the skin is limited to 1,000 milligrams as well. And the reason why this legislation is in place is to minimize the risk of overconsumption. So edibles definitely has that risk of overconsumption. We'll get into why that is in a few questions. And so this is why we needed some regulation around what that packaging and content looked like. All right, question 6. This is true or false. Along with edibles, alcoholic beverages infused with cannabis are now legal. So alcoholic beverages infused with cannabis are legal under the edible legislation and amendment. Countdown's on. You got 3 seconds. False. You guys are smart. So alcohol cannot be combined with any cannabis products. You may see that some alcoholic beer or wine companies are making cannabis infused drinks. That is okay, but it cannot have alcohol in them. So some companies are just diversifying a bit to avoid any confusion there. They don't have alcohol. Along with that, with edibles, packaging must be plain and they cannot appeal to children, right? So it has to have the contents, the name, and anything else is very, very plain. The products also can't have any added sugar or added caffeine. So things that are naturally occurring, like caffeine that naturally occurs in chocolate, is still allowed. But aside from that, there's a lot of restriction when it comes to the ingredients of edibles and how it can be marketed. It also can't really be any like character shapes or anything like that that might confuse a child or someone who's not intending to consume cannabis from taking it. Again, just protecting potential cannabis poisoning. Next question. Let's see. Here we go. Question 7. Another true or false. Cannabis smoke is less harmful than cigarette smoke. Nice. You got the answers coming in quickly today. That's good on this one. We have 3 seconds. We'll figure out who's right. All right. So we're split on this one. The answer is false. So cannabis smoke is just as harmful than cigarette smoke, but it is harmful in different ways. So smoke is smoke, right? And that's the important thing to remember. Cannabis is just as dangerous and harmful to the lungs, and it can also impact people through secondhand smoking. So not only do cigarettes pose that secondhand smoke risk, but so does cannabis smoke. It's also important to know that the effect, if you're smoking cannabis, only takes seconds to minutes, but it can last from 6 to 24 hours. So that lasting effect is very long, and it does have that intoxicating effect. So the harm when it comes to smoking and driving, if you don't realize how intoxicated you are, cannabis poisoning, if you're not purchasing legal cannabis, which we know from the National Cannabis Survey, not everyone does, even though it's legal, you could be consuming other chemicals in that product as well. So the danger is the same, just in different ways. Checking out our leaderboard. Oh, we got JJ sneaking up. Nice. Jess, yes, I'll repeat how long it stays in our system. First, we're going to jump on to the next question. It was already starting. So which method of use has the greatest risk of overconsumption? So vaping, smoking, edibles, or topicals? The greatest risk of overconsumption. Oh, nice. We got 4 just in the nick of time. Exactly. Edibles. So edibles does have the greatest risk of overconsumption because that effect, it takes up to 30 minutes or 3 or 4 hours to actually feel the effect. So often people will think, oh, nothing happened, I should consume more. And then maybe it took 4 hours and now they're feeling the effects and they have taken too much. So it's digested through the stomach instead of the lungs, and that's why it takes longer. So for smoking, cannabis can stay in your system for 6 to 24 hours, right? So they've seen a range of times. It's a very wide range, but it's important to know that so that you can plan your day accordingly and not have to operate heavy machinery or have to report for duty. So a topical would be any kind of salve or cream, something that would be put on the skin. Typically, people may use this for pain reduction. there's some evidence that that may work. So that's what a topical would look like. It would be in a little canister and almost be like a moisturizer consistency. So again, edibles takes a lot longer to feel the effect, and it does have the greatest risk of overconsumption. Checking out the leaderboard now. Seal is still got the seven answer streak. Awesome. Question 9. The effects of vaping cannabis can last up to 1 hour, 6 to 24 hours, 24 plus hours, or 4 to 8 hours. We had a little hint on this one. Yeah, 6 to 24 hours. So the same effects as cannabis smoking. So in a joint form or rolled form is the same as vaping. So it can last from 6 to 24 hours. It's also easy to overconsume with vaping as well. So it depends on how much your device can store. It could be more than a regular rolled or joint method, right? Safety is unknown with vaping. There's a lot of issues that have come out around contamination with vitamin E and causing fat droplets in people's lungs and making them very, very ill. Some other e-juices also have very toxic chemicals like butane or jet fuel included in them. So that's important to know if you're choosing to vape cannabis. There are some very specific risks that come along with that choice. And it's important to know what you're getting into, and that it's not just this natural, relaxing cannabis flower that you're smoking, right? It is can be a lot more dangerous than how that sounds. Checking out the leaderboard, just over halfway through. And I don't know if anyone can keep up with Seal, but I think the race is for second place now. Let's go on to question 10. Cannabis extracts tend to have a low potency. True or false? False. Awesome. So the potency can actually be very, very high, 60 to 80%, sometimes upwards of 90, and that's the percentage of THC, so that intoxicating cannabinoid. It can be called something like hash oil, wax, or dab. And that's where the term dabbing actually comes from. There's some evidence that cannabis does induce some allergic reactions in a lot of people. Very, very minor reactions, but that's where the sneezing would come from. So that dabbing dance move actually comes out of that cannabis culture, and sneezing a lot, especially when consuming cannabis extracts. So a little pop culture kind of reference there to know where that dance move actually comes from. Again, this level of potency is not legal and would not fall into the new legislation. So be aware of that. Checking out that leaderboard. Looks like Lily was on a streak. Good job. Streak of 3. That's awesome. Moving on to question 11. Fill in the question. So topical cannabis products. Oh, spelt impairment wrong. Sorry. Oh, nice. This one was a lot of reading, so good job. You guys got in there just in time. So yes, topical cannabis products may cause impairment. Again, talking about that more, it is that cream-based put on the skin. And the risk is still there because the skin is absorbent. So depending on the amount of THC in the product, it could still cause impairment. So know that if you are using topical products, it could still affect how you drive, think, memory, all those sorts of things. Checking in once more. Nice. Leaderboard's looking good. Question 12. What is the current rate of cannabis use in Canada? So with legalization, as of last year in 2019, what is the current rate of cannabis use? Nice. So 25%. And this is according to the National Cannabis Survey in the second quarter of 2019. And it did increase from the 14 to 18% range that we saw before legalization. It could be that more people are consuming cannabis. It also could be that people just feel less stigma about stating their use, and they may not be necessarily new users. So this is interesting information, especially for people who are creating policy and legislation to track the trends of usage in Canada throughout the process of legalizing the product. Just a fun little tidbit, the global use is about 2.5%. And that includes the entire population of the globe. So that also includes like children and younger people. So it definitely reduces that percentage. But Canada being one of the only countries to have legal cannabis use recreationally, definitely have a higher rate than the globe. Checking in as we get close to the end of the game. Jess had a nice streak of 5. Keep it up. True or false? Cannabis has minimal short-term effects. Minimal short-term effects. False. Good job. So definitely has short-term effects. A lot of the time, maybe we think, oh, I don't really feel it. Maybe the long-term effects are a bit more. But when we talk about impairment, that happens almost immediately when it comes to smoking or vaping. So cannabis does have those short-term effects. If you have the chat available too, what are some of those short-term effects that cannabis can have? Put some of those thoughts that you have in the chat, and we'll see what that list comes up with. Any ideas? So I'll give you one. It definitely decreases or impairs memory. So that is a short-term effect. And it does also impair your driving. So could be anything like accidents or traffic accidents. Poisoning is also a potential short-term side effect. So consuming too much or consumption from a pet or a child. Not able to concentrate, right? Decreased focus for sure. And that's can be a bit of a myth. Doesn't necessarily help that. And it does affect everyone differently. So this wide range of short-term effects could be different for a lot of people. Let's explore these short-term effects a little bit more with question number 14, which is not a short-term health effect. Right? So this is a bit of a gimme because we talked about it a little bit, which is not a short-term health effect. Right. So better driving is not a short-term health effect. That is a myth. a lot of the time people say, oh, it helps me focus, or I relax more so I can pay attention on the road. But actually, drug use is surpassing alcohol now more for impaired driving. And with the National Cannabis Survey, 39% of people report driving 2 hours after cannabis use. And we know that cannabis use can impair us for 6 to 24 hours. So it's really important that we acknowledge that it does impair our driving. It can cause overconsumption, potentially psychotic episode, and that would be more short-term, and secondhand smoke. So just the consumption of that secondhand, there is some evidence that people could have an intoxicating effect from secondhand smoke. Checking out that leaderboard. Jess is moving her way up. Streak of 7, right on. True or false? Cannabis use can affect your mental health. Yes, so it is true. Long term, it can cause something like psychosis to those who are already at risk of mental health issues. It can also increase panic and anxiety in the short term. The thing is, short term, sometimes it does cause relief for people, or it does relieve some of these symptoms for some individuals. But long term, it can exacerbate these issues. So it becomes a little bit of a cat chasing the tail, right? You're trying to relieve the symptoms that are being magnified when you're sober by consistent use. And addiction is very real. So 1 in 10 people will become addicted to cannabis, and 1 in 16. So if you consume before you're 25, before your brain is fully developed. When you start using every day, that starts to increase to about 1 in 4 to 1 in 6. So addiction is definitely possible when it comes to cannabis, and being aware of those signs is key in reducing our own risk. We're getting close to the end with only a couple more questions left. True or false? Everyone's response to cannabis is different. True. Nice. So everyone's response is different. And this comes down to the endocannabinoid system. So everyone has this tongue twister, this system in their body. Now, the system exists in regulation of most of our metabolic functions. So if you think of eating or sleeping, those sorts of things, the endocannabinoid system supports. Now, this system doesn't exist because of cannabis, but cannabis does stimulate the receptors that are a part of this system. So if you're curious about this, you can write it down and check in on what this system looks like later. There are some good TED Talks actually on it. So no one has the exact same amount of receptors as another person, and nor are they in the exact same place. So that's why consuming cannabinoids may affect and does affect people differently. So if you choose to use, don't just do what your friends do, right? Know how you respond and how you're affected, and be honest about how you feel if you choose to use in a safe way. So the endocannabinoid system, that is really the reason why everyone's response to cannabis is different. It also depends on how much you smoke or consume, the potency, the environment you're in. So the variables start to multiply when you think about those external variables. We're on our last question. So the last one is, the best way to lower your risk is what? This is a trick a little bit, right? It's the best way. Yeah, okay. So avoiding consumption is really the best way to lower your risk because you're not involving yourself in any risk. So good job. I know I tricked you a bit. Start low, go slow is definitely a way to reduce risk, but isn't the best way possible. So you've got our podium. Number 3, Lily, good job. Jess, you got second place. No surprise, we've got dun, 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 Seal, number 1. Good job. So you get a little virtual kudos there. Nice work, everybody. Hopefully you learned something with that too. Now I'm going to stop sharing that screen and transfer over to our presentation slides. So I'm going to scooch on over. Did everyone enjoy that? Let me know in the comments if you liked that or how that went for you. Hopefully most people could participate or were at least able to grab a pen and paper. Nice, good. So we're going to finish off with some information on lowering risk and harm reduction, just to make sure those strategies are super clear for everybody. So this is an infographic that was released as edibles were released as part of the new legislation. So start low, go slow is really the tagline if you consume cannabis. Remembering that choosing not to use is really your best way to reduce risk. Knowing what products and what your products contain is really key. And knowing that if you're consuming edibles, the time that it takes to feel those effects and how long those effects last for. So it could be anywhere from 6 to 24 hours. With vaping, knowing the effects happen in seconds to minutes and can take up to 30 minutes to feel the full effects as well. So these are really key points, especially if this is the first time that you have used cannabis. You want to make sure that, again, you're finding how it affects you first rather than going off what other people tell you to use. Specific to the new products, know that everyone's response to cannabis can differ and does differ. Effects can also vary from one time to the next. So depending on what environment you're in or how you're feeling or what you ate or drank, this can affect your experience. It takes longer to feel the effects after eating or drinking compared to smoking or vaping. And the higher the THC content in a product, the more likely one will experience adverse effects and greater levels of impairment. So THC is something you definitely want to be aware of and reduce if you're looking to reduce risk. And avoid combining cannabis with nicotine, alcohol, other drugs or health products, anything that can affect your consciousness, right? So any kind of stimulant can make a very negative experience and a potentially dangerous experience. Overall, so between vaping, cannabis, salves, topicals, dried flower, start low, go slow, right? So keep track of the product that you're using and only increase that very slowly if you don't feel an effect and you're choosing to use for specific reasons. Choose a product with a low amount of THC again, right? And if consuming edibles, that product should contain less than 2.5 milligrams. Know that packages can be upwards of 10 milligrams. So just because it's offered on the cannabis site, right, doesn't mean it is the best for you. Avoiding smoking cannabis can help to preserve your lung health. And avoiding frequent use can also help to reduce the risk of addiction. We talked about avoiding consumption with other products and making sure that you store your cannabis products safely. So make sure they're locked, make sure they're out of the reach of children and pets, and make sure that they're very well labeled and they're not attractive to children or pets. And make sure we don't drive high, right? These effects can last up to 24 hours. You can find taxis, we can find friends to give us a lift, but do not drive high, and please don't get into a car with someone who is impaired. You can find more information on the lower risk cannabis use guidelines, which is that evidence-based harm reduction approach to cannabis use in Canada, developed by CAMH. So again, a lot of the things we've talked about is there. Some of the ones that aren't covered in these last recommendations is abstaining, right? So knowing that not choosing is the best way to reduce risk, and not using synthetic cannabinoids. So no, they're not legal, but you may find yourself using them if maybe a friend brings them over, you're not sure where they've come from. Synthetic cannabinoids are not advised. Avoid smoking burnt cannabis, again, more harmful to the lungs. And I will share these resources and these last slides in the chat with you so that you don't have to have these memorized, but they're just a great way to reference the resources and to have at your side as a little buddy to remind yourself. So you can go ahead and download that. It also includes these resources and different links where you can find very well researched recommendations and resources. We also have the Ontario Cannabis Store, if you're in Ontario, is a great resource for education as well. CAF Addiction Services is there for you as well. Health promotion, right? So more addiction awareness and prevention, as well as general PSP staff. If you're looking for any type of addiction counseling, there is the base addiction counselor or your base wing mental health staff. Surgeon or senior medical authority and base wing chaplains can help connect you to any of these resources as well. If you're calling or don't feel like you have access to these services because of COVID-19 and being a little bit more isolated, you can access these support systems by phone. So the CIFMAP, Canadian Forces Member Assistance Program, the phone number is there, so you can call for a confidential talk 24 hours a day, every day. The Family Information Line is also there, and military medical centers you can call and access support services at any center in Canada. For any inquiries into maybe more local policy and some of your base orders, you can contact your local leadership and Surgeon General. Oh, I think I skipped a slide there. And general resources. We've got lots of resources today. These are COVID-19 specific. So again, CIFMAP is repeated, Canada's suicide hotline, information on COVID-19. So a good hotspot if you just want to check in on numbers and not watch the news because it can be overwhelming. Family Information Line again, SMRC, so Sexual Misconduct Response Center, and Kids Help Phone. All great resources, as well as CMP, ARC, Administrative Response Center. So great for questions around policy. There's a phone number and email there. So we are resources filled up. We're about 5 minutes over time, but I'll just end with a couple of polling questions just to see how today went for you and what your benefits were. Let me share this now. Yeah, there we go. So I feel I can apply what I learned today in my daily living. So strongly disagree at the top to strongly agree at the bottom. Give a few seconds to answer that. Thank you very much. And then the next poll is more specific to the Demio platform. So how satisfied are you with the Demio platform? So the chat, the polls, being able to hear or see me, strongly disagree at the top and strongly agree at the bottom. Strongly agree, I guess, would be that you're very satisfied. Awesome. Thank you so much for those answers. And to end off today in the chat, I will just share with you the link to the upcoming webinars. hopefully you're planning out the rest of your week and joining us on some other health promotion webinars. There's a ton of different topics that you can join in on. And you can also follow PSP Kingston on Facebook, where we're providing a lot of different content, games, contests, fitness programs. So definitely check out the Facebook platforms from all the bases. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and share them in the chat. Anything you thought about during our Kahoot game or that's maybe coming up for you now. If you don't have any questions, you're welcome to send a little thumbs up or a wave, and hopefully we'll see you in the next webinar. You're welcome, Jess, Renee. Have a great day. Share this information with other people you know. Thanks, Krista. See you, Jackie. All right, doesn't look like any questions, so I'll end the session now and wish you all a great day. Take care.